You're really going to enjoy this conversation this week. We have Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri. You may recognize him from some of his Senate hearings, but more importantly, we discuss big issues like immigration, and we also talk about what it is to be a dad and a U.S. Senator. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and listen to Better Bad Ideas wherever you get your podcast. Let's get to the episode.
I'm Sean O'Brien, General President of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters.
Put your helmets on, buckle your chin straps. It's a full contact sport.
We're going to find out who has a better bad idea. All right, so I appreciate you being here. So
yeah, thank you.
I have the pleasure of meeting you about a year and a half ago. We had a great meeting. You're one of 100 of the most influential people in the country. And you bring a certain morality to politics, which is refreshing. And I think everybody knows you as Josh Hawley, the U.S. Senator. Tell us about Josh Hawley, the husband and father.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be with you. It's great to. I'm a huge admirer of what you're doing and what the Teamsters have done historically. I can't think of many organizations of any kind in this country that have mattered more and been more significant than the Teamsters to our history. So hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about that. But yeah, you just put your finger on, you said husband and father, and those are probably the two most important things in my life, Sean. I mean, I'm married to a beautiful woman who is not only the beauty of our operation, obviously, but also the brains of our operation. My problem is my wife, Erin, when we go out in public together and people hear her speak, then they don't want to hear me. They're like, oh, we see who has the brains here. And then we've got 3 beautiful children, all of whom just had birthdays. So my oldest is 12. My oldest boy, my younger boy just turned 10. And then my little girl just turned 4. And I'll just tell you right now, my little girl has her daddy absolutely wrapped around her finger. I mean, it's just, we recently...
so she's really the U.S. Senator?
She is. She really is. And my wife told a funny story the other day, and she really got me because she told it in front of an audience. Now, you know how this is. I can't contest it. I was hearing it for the first time, and she's up in front of people, and she says, well, let me tell you about Josh. And Abigail is my little girl, and she said she took Abby to the grocery store or something the other day, and Abby started fussing about wanting a toy. And my wife said, Abby, I just am not going to get that for you. And she said, you could see, my little girl is a force of nature, and she started to really pitch a fit. And then she stopped, and she thought about it. And she said to my wife, that's okay, Mommy. I just asked Daddy. Everyone's like, oh, I see how it is. So she learned quick, and she's got her daddy on a short leash.
Well, I love the fact you just recently sworn in as a second-term U.S. Senator, so I saw a nice picture of your family while you were getting sworn in, and I saw Abigail with her mouth wide open making a gesture, and it brings back great memories to me because I have 2 boys, 23 and 20, and, kind of similar to you, we were always kind of in the public eye at different events, and I always try to include my boys into as much as I could because, part of it is you want them to see what you do and why you're away so much and meet the people you're working with or working for. And I just remember my 2 sons, I was telling the story earlier, we were at an event, a meeting in Florida. They were 6 and 4, and an old-time friend of mine who was at the meeting says, hey, did you bring the boys? And at that point in time, I was just about to answer yes. And you heard my youngest calling the oldest names upon names. And then we look over the mezzanine, and the 2 O'Brien boys are in a full-out fist fight. I said, there they are.
There they are.
Would expect nothing less. But it's great great to see the family aspect of what you're doing. And how has that had an effect on your kids? Do they know exactly who their dad is? Do they know their dad is one of 100 of the most influential people in the country?
Well, we actually try to keep them as much as possible sheltered from a lot of that. And as my boys have gotten older, now that they're 12 and 10, they're old enough to have discovered this thing called YouTube. And so it's interesting, at their school, they'll come home to me sometimes, and maybe after a hearing or something, we had the Boeing CEO before us in the last few months, or some of the airline CEOs recently. And so I'll do that. And then the evenings I'll come home, and all of a sudden my boys at the dinner table will be like, Dad, we saw you roasted some guy today. I said, where'd you see that? And how did you see it? Because, we don't really watch much TV. We watch sports, and that's about it in my house. And they'd say, oh, well, so, some kid at school comes to get on the bus, had YouTube, and they were showing us, they're like, hey, this is your dad, you know this person. And so anyway, for the way I think about it is that we try to help. I try to tell my kids the truth, which is that, hey, listen, I'm a man of faith. I mean, God has, I believe, God has me here, and this is the responsibility He's given me. But you know what? All of us are called to responsibility in every walk of our lives, and the work that we're called to, each of us, whether that's being a father, whether that's driving a truck, whether that's farming, which is what a lot of my family does. That is all significant work. Anybody who works for a living and does it honorably deserves our respect, and also is contributing something. And I don't know what my boys will grow up to do. I hope they don't get into politics. I bet they won't. But I hope what they're getting from us and from their mother is that we're here to use our gifts to the best that we can. We want to serve other people, and we want to honor work. And my work right now, at least, is in the Senate, and I want them to be proud of that and see that I work with integrity. But I also want them to go out there and find their calling in life, wherever that may be, and honor that.
So the unsung hero in your house has to be your wife, Erin, right?
100%.
Right. So I have an unsung hero in my life, my girlfriend, Christine.
Yeah.
But oftentimes, they're shadowed with responsibilities. They're shadowed with the responsibility of raising the kids. What's your story with Erin?
We actually met working together at the Supreme Court. We both worked for the Chief Justice. It's a one-year thing, a clerkship it's called, one-year clerkship. We did this out of law school. And I knew who she was, but I didn't know her personally.
Did she know who you were?
Well, just from law school. So she knew of me. We knew each other. We knew of each other. And then we just, as this happened, Sean, it just happenstance, we started working for the chief on the same day, and we got put in the same office. And I said, man, that's the best moment of chance that ever happened to me, because she couldn't escape, and I wore her down. And after a couple of months, she agreed to go out on a date with me.
So clearly there wasn't any human resource policy that you violated.
If there was, I did not ask. It's one of those things that's like, hey, don't ask, don't tell.
You're so driven when you're doing these hearings, and we'll talk about that later on, and you're so prepared. And you follow the rules, you do your homework, but you clearly didn't do your homework here because you didn't care about the policy, right?
I tell you what, I was driven in one sense. I met this girl, and it didn't take me very long. I saw her, and I watched her in action. I was like, man, she's amazing. I got to find a way to get this girl to date me. So I was willing to do about whatever it took. And I tell you what, we did start dating that year. We dated the whole year, and we kept it a secret. Just we didn't want it to interfere with other people. And I was very pleased when a little bit after that, maybe a year and a half after that, we went in. We were done with the job, but we went in to go tell our old boss that we were getting engaged. And he said, I had no idea. And I said, that's just how we wanted it, Chief. But
well, see, in the Teamsters Union, if you want to keep a secret, never tell a Teamster. So even if you kept it a secret, it would have got out somehow. It would have been all over the place. So that's pretty honorable that it didn't get out. But she's a lawyer as well.
She is.
Who wins the arguments? Because you're pretty good at what you do, and if she's probably better at you than what you do, right?
Yeah.
So who wins the arguments? Not that there's many.
14 and a half years of marriage, Sean, I've never won an argument. Which I learned early on. It's probably not the wisest thing in the world to try to win the arguments. But I also learned early on, man, she's awfully good. So you go toe to toe with her. Good luck. But
so you dated, you got married.
Yeah.
You clearly let her know early on that you wanted to be in politics.
This is a funny story. She's a New Mexico girl, grew up on a ranch, cattle ranch, 6 generations born to that ranch, family still ranches. And her family had been involved in politics, Democrats, longtime Democrats. She's not, I hasten to say, but hey, longtime Democrats. And she said to me early on in our relationship, she said, I tell you what, she said, I'm open to all kinds of things. Just one thing, I don't ever want to be involved in politics. So here we are all those years later. So she obviously had an open mind because, 14 and a half years of marriage. We've been in politics now for 8 years, I guess. And it's been a wild ride. But
what was it like great. Your first race as Attorney General? What was your drive to become the Attorney General?
Well, I just, I was a practicing lawyer at that point. I had done a bunch of First Amendment law as well, which is still a passion of mine. And I just thought, you look at what an attorney general can do in terms of standing up for the rights of people, and you can just do so much at scale. And I just thought, to have the opportunity to represent my state, but also to defend the people of my state. That's when you go into court as the attorney general, you're on, in my case, the state of Missouri, you're there on behalf of the people of the state of Missouri. And I just thought, boy, there is so much to do. You can do so much more than one guy in court. I love the cases that I worked on and litigated individually, but that's kind of like chipping away at an iceberg, one little chip at a time. You go in as attorney general, and you can affect so much more and do so much more. And we did things like, well, heck, we sued the big tech companies. We took on deadbeat landlords in St. Louis and in Kansas City. We stood up for workers' rights. So that was a tremendous amount of fun, a tremendous honor. But my first campaign was rough because I'd never done it before. And I was not the establishment's choice in my own party to be the nominee. They wanted a different guy who was a longtime politician.
I mean, some of that kind of carried over to your run for Senate.
Totally.
But, being a young person, right, running for a pretty powerful position in your state, how did you react to the criticism or the attacks, so to speak? Because, I know in union politics, although everybody says don't listen to the attacks, don't pay attention to them, but sometimes when you go down that rabbit hole and you're reading the comments or you're reading articles about you that are not true and they're not flattering, it takes its toll on you. How did you deal with that, being your first campaign?
That's a great question. What I learned in that first campaign, and it was pretty brutal. What I learned there is I developed my own strategy for dealing with criticism and being able to take it on the chin. And I learned to ignore everything that I did not absolutely have to address in order to go forward. I just learned that, I could read every negative thing about myself. I could read every positive thing too. Probably not worth doing either. Because if you read everything positive, you start to love your own press clippings, and pretty soon you find yourself doing stuff for the press clippings. Not a good way to behave. On the other hand, if you take in all that negativity, then my response is to do what you were just hinting at, which is say, well, that's wrong and that's a lie and that's not true, and you get defensive. And I thought, I don't want to be defensive all the time. I don't want to live and react defensively. I want to be moving forward. And so part of that campaign and the years that followed is learning to deal with criticism and learning to live with it and to say, hey, as it turns out, one of the things I discovered about myself is I can actually take a pretty fair amount of criticism. Most of it doesn't bother me, and I just learned to tune out what I didn't have to deal with and just to keep going forward. And I tell you what, who it's harder for, and you know this too, it's really harder on your family, because it's one thing for you to tune it out, but for people around you who are seeing it on TV or reading it in the press or whatever, that's tough. And so you've got to learn how to shelter the family and bring them along appropriately too. But really, in a word, I'd say it toughened me up. That first campaign was about just getting a good, thick, tough skin. And I think that's something that's pretty valuable.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're the same in politics in the union and or any of our daily activities where, we can get criticized by 1.3 million members for the decisions we make. But it is, to your point, it is very taxing on your families and your loved ones that care about you. I know my kids, they're 23 and 20, and I kind of had a similar rise at a young age in the Teamsters Union. And when they were about 12 or 13, obviously they would listen to what people were saying at school. And, Boston and Massachusetts are a pretty tight-knit community, but it's also a very, very small world where people talk about everything. And, I knew they were hearing, bad things or allegations and or opinions that weren't consistent. And I can just remember just trying to explain to them. And then I thought, I don't have to explain to anybody. My kids are going to figure it out on their own. They're going to understand, what their father does. The hardest part, I think, is self-control and not responding to a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you, 100%. Because especially when it's false, it's wrong, you want to go out there and correct the record. You want to confront people who are saying it. And I just, early on, somebody pointed out to me this great Winston Churchill quote that, it goes something like, if you stop to throw stones at every dog that barks, you'll never get where you're going. And I learned that, in some cases the hard way. The amount of energy, if you're directing at your critics constantly, it's like, no, wait a minute. In a way, if I do that, I'm letting my critics control me, because now they've got my attention, they've got the agenda. Why would I do that? I'm just ignore those people. If I need to deal with it, then sure, deal with it, correct the record, but then you move on and keep going towards the goal. And that's easier said than done. But it's
you know what I admire most about you is the fact that you put your state first always in any and all situations. And I've single-handedly witnessed a lot of your hearings. I'm a big fan, like I said earlier, but I think when you're dealing with an organization that I happen to have the great responsibility and privilege to represent, the organization comes first, just like your state comes first. And I think my experience in politics, and maybe you can speak to it, is some people that have the fortune to get elected by their communities, by their states, actually sometimes forget who they're working for and what their mission is and what they're elected to do. Do you see that in politics?
Oh, yeah. And I think, having been around the Senate now for a little bit, I can see how it happens, which is these guys spend, elected members of Congress and then the lobbyists and the press, they all spend all their time together, and they're all in the building together all the time. And pretty soon it becomes well, Senator so-and-so thinks that, and that reporter, he thinks that, and the people that I see, out on the social circuit, they think that, and man, I need to think like they do. And part of the way I avoid all that is I don't do any of that stuff. And I don't go out to the cocktail parties at night. I go home to my family,
Right.
I go home, put my kids to bed, spend time with my wife. And then you said it well. I mean, my job is to represent the people of my state. And sometimes, people will say to me, well, why are you taking the positions you do? Republicans will say to me, you went out and walked a picket line, Josh. Why'd you do that? And I said, that's easy. It's because the working people of my state, I'm there to represent them. They need my help. They're getting screwed in these particular instances. Gray bar is a good example of this. Great example. And I'm like, this is not a hard call at all. This is about me being responsible for the people who sent me there to do something for them. And, if that confuses people in D.C., I don't care. My job is to represent
No, and I
Missouri.
think it's important to be open-minded, but also be your own person when you're doing your job, whatever that may be. So you're the Attorney General for how many terms?
One term,
2
years, and then I ran for this job.
What made you run for this job?
Well, I'll be honest with you. At first, I didn't want to because I had zero interest, Sean, in ever being part of a legislature. The nice thing about being Attorney General, I was independently elected. If I wanted to sue Google, Amazon, I could sue them.
You had free reign.
I didn't have to ask anybody, And Congress, I looked at Congress and I'm like, man, that's just one long meeting, and I hate meetings.
Yep.
But I tell you what eventually got me was, when my wife and I really sat down, we thought about it, thought it over, the consequence of the issues that come before the Senate. And at this time in American history, I just think we're at an inflection point in American history. We're in one of those periods of time when the choices and decisions that we make in these years, in this window of time, are going to determine the future of the country for the next 70 years.
I think right now, to your point, I agree with you 100%. This is the time where decisions need to be made that are going to positively affect generations to come.
That's right.
And I think one of the most important things is working together, right? Collaborating on issues that we may never have collaborated on before. And I think, we have a great opportunity, both Democrats, Republicans, and whoever else, to actually work together. Let's not draw a line in the sand, and let's get some things done. So you coming in at 39 years old, you get elected, youngest senator ever elected, or youngest senator at the time. And I know that in our business, my day job, I always had a rise at a young age to pretty prominent positions because of hard work, courage, and conviction, just like what you do every day. The one thing that bothered me the most about, coming into these positions at a young age was you always had the people that have been around a long time, the men and women, who would often tell me, you're going too fast, you're going too hard, wait your time. Your time will come. Did you experience any of that when you first came into the Senate?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Both in running for Attorney General and in the Senate. And particularly in the Senate, the things I immediately chose to focus on. I immediately started talking about we need to take on these big corporations. We need to go after the big tech companies. We need to take on the monopolists. Look what they're doing to workers. Look what they're doing to consumers. And, for a lot of my party, I would just say as a Republican, if you look all the way back, you look at figures
I keep
like—
forgetting you're a Republican.
I know. Well,
you probably forget I'm a Democrat.
That's
too,
right,
right?
and that's how we want it, right? That's what
Right,
you're talking
exactly.
about. But I look at one of my great heroes is Theodore Roosevelt. So I've tried to, in many ways, he's influenced me hugely. I've modeled myself after
I think
him.
you wrote a book too.
I wrote a book about him.
Right.
So you look at Roosevelt, and it's like he understood the problems of monopoly. He understood the need to protect the working man and woman. But, in more recent years, in the 90s and forward, Republicans have gotten away from a lot of that. So when I came into the Senate and was really talking about these issues and trying to do my best to push them forward, I got a lot of pushback. People said, whoa, you sound too much like a Democrat. You're being way too aggressive. Just simmer. You're being too disruptive. Just simmer down.
And so recently, I've been accused of sounding and acting too much like a Republican.
There you go.
But it had to be difficult because you move your life from Missouri, quiet Missouri, right, for the most part.
Yeah.
You get a tornado or two here and there, and a flood here and there, natural disasters that you have to deal with, which we'll talk about later on. But you basically come to D.C. When I came to D.C. 2.5 years ago, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And I'm from a city. I'm from Boston. I didn't like it because I didn't trust it. I didn't trust the people. I didn't trust the process. And so you're taking on a big role, one of 100 of the most influential people. You've got people, basically telling you to slow down, trying to act a certain way because they've been around a long time. It actually gives you motivation to pursue what you're looking to pursue, and that's on behalf of your constituency in Missouri. What were some of the most difficult adjustments you had to make?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, being willing, I think I had to get comfortable early on in the Senate with my role, with knowing that, hey, there's going to be a lot of times when I'm out there and a lot of my own party is not going to agree with me on this, and they're not going to back me up, and they may even hang me out to dry. I may be the only person who's going to vote a certain way, and this has persisted. I mean, a year ago, well, not quite, 9 months ago, we had a vote on the joint employer rule.
Right, you were strong on that for us. I think you were the only Republican senator that defected and voted for labor, for working people on that issue, and it proved to be the right decision.
I think so, and but I tell you what, that being willing to do, I did that because I thought it was the right thing. But I had the years to go back to the Attorney General's campaign we were talking about, and then my early years in the Senate. Just built up the fortitude to say, hey, that's fine. If I'm the only one out there on this issue, that's fine. And if I get criticized for it, that's fine. I'm here to do a job. I'm not here to be loved by the DC press. I'm not even here. I like my colleagues a lot, but I don't represent them. I represent the people of Missouri. And I think just getting into that mindset and being willing to plow ahead was important for me in my early years, and heck, still is.
Well, that Amazon position you took gave you tremendous credibility with our members, with labor in general. I think early on when we started talking, we talked about national right to work, and we explained, how that's not good in the private sector for your constituents. And you publicly came out and said, I no longer support national right to work. And so you've been demonstrating all along that you're going to listen. Right. And you're going to do what's in the best interest of your constituents. And you did that with Amazon. And the sad part about Amazon, it's in every single state that we're in. Now, you're a former former Attorney General. And so your role is to enforce labor law, wage and hour violations. And we all know how Amazon hides behind that DSP model, and they violate the wage and hour provisions. So you had a lot more exposure and a lot more experience, not only with Amazon, but I'm sure there were a lot of employers that didn't do the right thing by their employees. And when you were, taking that position to support the Amazon legislation, and you had those conversations, I would assume, with your colleagues in the Republican Party, what were their attitudes like?
I think that there's a lot of misconceptions and misunderstanding in my party on this issues. I think people don't understand sometimes the real world effect. And when we voted, for instance, on that joint employer rule, I just said to them, listen, guys, I said, this is really about, companies like Amazon and McDonald's. I mean, companies who are trying to skirt the rules and treat their employees, frankly, in Amazon's case, treat them really badly and avoid the law by finding these fine-grained legal interpretations, and we just can't let them do it. And I still remember on that vote, they held that vote open longer. Votes are supposed to be 15 minutes in the Senate. They're never that short. They always drag on and on. But they held that vote open for so long because people, after I was down there on the floor, and they were like, wait. They were afraid I was going to vote, basically against Amazon and with you. And they said, wait. So-and-so wants to come down and talk to you. Don't vote yet. We'll hold the vote open. So-and-so wants to call you and get you on the phone. You know, it was this intense sort of last-minute lobbying campaign. And I just said, listen, my mind is made up. You know, I mean, it's made up. And
So they don't historically do that with every single vote?
No, that's not the norm. That's not the norm. That's not the norm.
Shocking, right?
Yeah.
And I tell you, the one other thing that was important to us early on was we had Gray Bar on strike. And you were the only Republican senator that has ever walked one of our picket lines. What was that like for you being in your home state?
Well, it was a privilege. It was a privilege to be invited by the men and women on strike to come out there and to be invited by you. It's a privilege to be with them. And what I mostly did was listen, which, you know, you mentioned listening a second ago. That's an underrated activity in Washington, I think. You know, we do a lot of talking, but listening. And if you just, this is what I say to my colleagues, and I've said to my Republican colleagues, I said, hey, I'll take you, come with me, come to a picket line. And I said, just come out and listen, hear the real world experience of these folks. But, you know, here you've got hardworking Missourians who, they just walked me through. And number one, all they're asking for is they wanted a pay raise, which they hadn't gotten in years, and they wanted an end to the differential pay scale. And, you know, you listen to their stories, how they couldn't afford to pay the rent on their apartments. Not even a mortgage. We're talking about an apartment. You know, people say, oh, well, these guys are living a high life. Give me a break. These are working people with families. They're trying to put food on their table for their kids. They're trying to provide a place, roof over their kids' heads. And it is not too much to ask that they might get a decent cost of living adjustment. If nothing else, they've gotten nothing. And so, you know, you did a great job on that contract.
So there's some people you talk to on those picket lines, right? That
Exactly.
are worrying about how they're going to pay their rent. They're worrying about how they're going to put their kids through school. And some of those members, I guarantee you, if you talk to them, were paying the utilities and other bills on credit cards that have, I think you championed a hearing recently where you had the CEO or the CFOs of MasterCard and Visa in front of a Senate hearing where you eviscerated and exposed that whole scheme that we're all victim to in some respects. You get small business that is forced into these high rates, and if they don't pay them, they won't offer the service. You've got a lot of our members, your constituents, who are paying 28, 29% on credit cards that they'll never be able to pay off.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about why you were so passionate about the credit card system in that hearing.
I just think that the idea that the average rate on credit cards for a normal person who's working a job, trying to pay their rent, trying to put food on the table, 35% and more right now, as we sit here today, is the average on many of these cards. Average. That's just extortionary. We used to have laws against it in this country.
Right.
A lot of states used to have laws against it. And many of them now don't. And heck, in the federal context, for federal credit unions who issue credit cards, we cap what they can charge. I think it's 18%, which is, by the way, still a very high rate. We cap that. I just said to these companies, Visa and MasterCard are the dominant ones in the industry, obviously. You're charging these people, our people, the American people, Missourians, extortionary rates that they cannot pay, to your point. And that's the business model. They know they can't pay.
Sure.
It. So you try to run up the debt, and we've never had more credit card debt in this country than we do right now. So people are hurting, they're in debt, they're getting absolutely killed. And I wanted to expose that and to put these guys on the record to say, are you telling me you've got record profits? Their CEOs are making record amounts of money in their salaries, but you're telling me that you can't charge less than 35% and that you can't accept any kind of adjustment? I mean, here's what I'd do. I would cap the rates. And I'm glad President Trump has now said he wants to do that. I think that's a great idea. I've introduced legislation that would cap it. I see no reason why these companies don't charge
it was interesting when you were asking their profit margin.
Yes.
And one was 50% and the other was north of 50%.
Yes.
And, you know, that's, to your point, that's criminal.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, I look at my members, right, who in some cases make six figures, $110,000, $105,000. They're working 60, 70 hours. And they're in credit card debt because they've got to pay a mortgage with high rates. They've got to pay credit cards with high rates, and everything costs money.
Yeah.
I think everybody's focus is on, or a lot of people focus on how great the stock market's doing, how great the economy allegedly is. But that's Wall Street.
Right.
When you come down to Main Street, it's not such a rosy picture. And I assume you deal with that a lot because you're at home.
That's right.
You're in the trenches talking to your constituents. And then, you've got to kind of hold people accountable in these hearings. I'm amazed at how you do your homework, but I was just as amazed on how the people that come before you are not prepared to answer the questions.
No.
Now, I've been in a few Senate hearings, as you know, and some went good, some didn't go so good. But the one thing that was clear is that you have our written testimony.
Yeah.
I think within 48 hours maybe or several days prior. And these people come to the hearings knowing that the questions, or you try and assume the questions you're going to be asking or being asked of. And I was just amazed at how all these educated financial geniuses, got amnesia.
Well, you know what that is, Sean, is that they think that they can get by with it, and they're used to just saying whatever they want. And they're used to talking their way out of any situation, and they're also used to a fair amount of deference. They're used to people, when they say, well, this is how it is, they're used to the guys and gals up on the dais saying, oh, well, okay, if that's what you say, then sure, okay, you're the expert, I defer to you. And when you push them a little bit, what I find, and I found this from my earliest days in the Senate, is most of these people, they don't like to be pushed. They're not used to being pushed. They certainly don't get that at work. They're in charge, and they get so much deference from everybody, the media. So when you push them, a lot of times they get really cranky really fast, and they clam up, and sometimes they don't know their facts, and sometimes they just out and out lie. They don't want to tell the truth.
Well, I think you made a great point on how they're trying to monopolize that whole industry. And
Totally.
if you capped, if there was legislation to cap the amount of interest they could charge, that would be pretty interesting to see what would happen at that point in time. I know that recently I was on another podcast and we were talking about the same issue, and there was an interesting strategy or interesting point made, saying, Sean, what do you do when an employer is not being reasonable? They won't negotiate in good faith. You come to impasse. We strike. We withhold our labor.
Yeah.
And I said to this person, imagine if credit cards, if all of our members or everybody in the United States that had X amount of credit card debt at anywhere between 20 to 30%, just withheld their payments. That would send a pretty strong message to the credit card companies.
Yes, it would.
It would probably, obviously ruin their credit. But at this point in time, if you're in tens of thousands of credit card debt, you don't really care about it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing that to me is just so frankly unforgivable, is that what they're doing, what these big companies are doing with these rates is they are destroying people's lives. It's beyond just making money. They make gobs of money. They're destroying people's lives to do it, and they don't care. And you can see that in the hearing. They sit there and say, well, it's not our fault. It's the market. It's out of our control. This is ridiculous.
Well, and think about where everyone's going. I was just recently in California, which I want to talk about a little bit later, and I went to pay. I got a sugar-free ice cream.
Okay, all right.
It wasn't the real one. Right? Just so you know, because the keeper of the house.
Yeah, I got
make sure I
you.
eat healthy. But I went to pay cash.
Yeah.
We don't take cash here.
Yeah.
So you're forced to use a debit or a credit card, right? So it's only going to get worse unless there are some regulations put in there.
That's right.
But the one thing that is important to us in our day job is making sure that our members have an opportunity. Right? An opportunity to not be billionaires or millionaires, but to live a normal middle-class life with, modest means and a modest retirement and not have to worry.
Yeah.
And it's tough. And then, you talk about these CEOs, the discrepancy in CEO pay.
Oh, it's absurd.
Between, the workers that make them the success that they are. And I recently watched Boeing.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy should be fired.
Oh, absolutely.
Or he should just quit.
There's the most glaring example. He's run his company into the ground, maybe literally. I mean, his planes are falling out of the sky, and he got year over year like a 40% increase from what, 1 year I think it was 39%. The next year on year, it was 43%. He's making tens of millions of dollars. Meanwhile,
the machinists
are exactly.
They're making 1%. They're
exactly.
getting 1%.
And hadn't gotten a raise in years and years, right? Their contract was way out of date. He wasn't, at the time he was before me, the machinist had to go on strike because he wouldn't negotiate.
Right.
And I'm thinking, man, and all the time they're telling me, why are they cutting all these corners on safety, which was the reason for the hearing, because, literally the doors are falling off.
I love the fact that he said, I stand behind my safety record.
Right.
And doors and wheels are falling off. And safety tests are being done with, I think it was Dawn dishwashing detergent.
And cheesecloth.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, but, his answer is, well, we have to cut costs. we just don't have the money. And I'm thinking, you're getting paid whatever, what, $35 million a year or something. Do you don't have the money?
So think about if you ran your household the way that Boeing was run. I mean, I think his testimony, and I watched it because we had a vested interest. We do have members that work at Boeing. And I'm watching and you asked him what his profit was.
Yeah.
How's your profit been since you've been CEO? We haven't made a profit since I've been CEO. But yet he's getting a 39% increase. And I think his salary, he wouldn't cop to it at first, but you dragged him out of it, was $33 million.
Yeah.
So he got 39%, whatever 39% of $33 million, significant increase.
Huge.
For a company that's not making any money, that's having a detrimental effect to the reputation, which you can never quantify the negative publicity they got as a result of that. And yet he's standing there saying, I stand by my record. And by the way, he's getting investigated by the DOJ, right?
Oh, exactly. Exactly right. And the other thing he did, Sean, at that hearing, which I found so offensive, is he said, well, okay, we have a culture problem at Boeing. We have a safety culture problem that really goes all the way down. I said, no, wait a minute. That's a subtle or not so subtle way of throwing the workers under the bus. You don't have a culture problem. What I told him is you have a C-suite problem. You people are the problem. They've taken a great company, and you said a second ago about having an interest in it because you've got Teamsters who are Boeing. I've got, in Missouri, we've got thousands of Boeing jobs. I mean, I don't want to see our people lose their jobs and not be able to provide for their families because this guy is cutting corners and getting paid $30+ million. And I told him that to his face. And again, he was all very upset about that, outraged. And I said, it's your company, and what they're doing is an outrage.
So why is the airline industry so arrogant? I mean, so you have Boeing who's making the planes.
Yeah.
You have United Airlines, who we're in a massive fight with right now. And, hopefully if we get our way through the RLA antiquated process, we'll have the ability to strike them because I think that's what they need. But then you have airlines like Frontier and Spirit that you obviously called them to task recently. Why is there such an arrogance in the airline industry, which once was very vulnerable and fragile?
Yeah.
I think 2008, 2009, where there was a lot of bankruptcy going on.
And again, during COVID, and we bailed them out big time in COVID. And what we saw happen there is what often happens is, you mentioned United. United was part of this, American. These guys got huge bailout. And then the first thing they did is immediately say, we're going to cut a whole bunch of jobs and cut pay. And I had to go to the mat then and say, oh, wait a minute. We didn't give you money so that your CEOs can get an increase. We are giving you taxpayer money so that all of your workers who are manning your planes can continue to man those planes and can go home and provide for their families. But, why are they arrogant? I think part of it is that they're monopolies now. There's very little real competition in the airline industry. Why is Google and Meta, why are they so arrogant? Same reason. They think that they're in control of everything, and they think they're accountable to nobody. And you mentioned, our recent airline hearing. I mean, what we found is that these airlines are charging different rates for customers on the same plane, for seats, for their carry-on bags, and then they're paying their own employees, their gate agents, they're giving them bonuses if they will kick customers off the plane because their bag, for which they paid, is too big to fit into that little carry-on thing. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's basically, how can we screw the consumer to make more money?
Right.
And then turn around and not pay our workers and charge the consumer more.
The consumer who are your constituents and my members.
That's right.
I love the fact when you were talking to Spirit Airlines.
I mean, you guys do appreciate that flying on your airlines is a disaster, don't you? I'm slightly amazed by the general attitude of all of you here. Flying on your airlines is horrible.
And you said, how does it feel to be the worst airline in the sky? Like, do you stay up at night thinking all this stuff? Because look, I have zero filter at times, but that just came right off. That came right out of nowhere.
Well, it came,
and we couldn't see the reaction. I couldn't see the reaction of the CEO when you said, "How does it feel to be the worst airline in the history of America?"
Yeah, he didn't like it too much. But I tell you what, it irritated me was I had just had to sit through their statements, their self-serving statements, where they were breaking their arms, patting themselves on the back for how wonderful they were. And I thought, this is such gaslighting. This is so ridiculous. I mean, that's such a steaming pile of what. And I just thought, everybody knows it. If you've flown in this country, you know what a terrible experience it is to fly. Every American consumer feels that way. And I just thought, somebody just needs to say that to these people. And they hate to hear it, but it's the truth, and they need to hear it.
What does the CEO of Spirit make?
I think that guy. I think he made 15 or 20 million.
And he's been shopping that company around for
absolutely
forever because he knows it's not sustainable.
Absolutely.
And he knows it's a fraud, right? But, it's funny watching you in your hearings. What do you do to prepare? What is a U.S. senator or what do you do? Because I don't think as many U.S. senators prepare as much as you do. What do you do to prepare for these hearings?
Well, I'm a lawyer still at heart, so I try to do my homework. I read a bunch. I've got a terrific staff that helps me look through if our witnesses have testified before. I go back and read their previous testimony. I try to get as many facts as I can, and then I think to myself, all right, what do I need to ask them about that they'll want to avoid? Where do they need to be held accountable? I think that's my job. This is in public. They're under oath. They're in front of the cameras. Where can I hold them accountable, get some accountability that hopefully will drive some change? And then what I try to do is get prepared for when they deny it or when they try to walk me down the primrose path. And I can say, wait a minute, no, actually, that's not right.
When they have that sudden, burst of diabetes.
That's right. That's right.
This
happens a lot.
Y'all like that Trucelin. Right?
That's good. I like that. I'm going to steal that.
You can.
I will tell you.
Just say when you're doing it in a hearing, right? Do me this. When you use that one, say Ibid, Sean O'Brien, page 4.
Okay. All right. Got it. All right.
Right? Does that sound good?
Sean O'Brien, Teamsters, page 4. I'll tell you though, my best ideas for questions come from being in the grocery store, going to the barber shop, going to church, just talking to people and listening to what they're saying. And a lot of times, they'll say, I can't believe, take back to the credit card for example. They'll tell me, they're like, let me tell you what my credit card bill was this last year or this last month. And they'll say, I'm having to put my groceries on my credit card. I just listening to folks and just hearing them and talking to them and just asking them that gives me the best sense of, all right, I need to ask these guys about this. And so when I get that opportunity, the way I think about it is then these guys come before me and I'm asking the question on everybody at home who has asked me for help, who has raised these issues with me. And I'm like, all right, I get to be their voice now and I get to put it to this guy. And I'm doing it on behalf of all these people who I represent.
But you're getting true testimonials from the people that you work for, right?
Yeah.
Those are the
right.
constituents, right?
Right?
So when you're in those hearings and and again, we're in venues too, like negotiations.
Yeah.
And we do our homework just like you do and we prepare. And there's no better feeling than when you're right on an issue and the other side is trying to deflect or deny the culpability and all this stuff. And I love the fact when people are being held accountable, whether it's in negotiations or Senate hearings. What do your colleagues think? You must have kind of a reputation now because I've watched a lot of your hearings and, I think you work a lot with Senator Blumenthal on the committee. And he's a decent guy. I think you guys have a good relationship.
Yeah, I do. He's a great guy.
And there's always like a little bit of a joke or a sarcasm when you look to him and say, do you want me to defer any more of my time or anything like this? So you must have a pretty good reputation as far as they know when you're coming to a hearing that you're going to be prepared and you're going to be the star of the show.
Well, I don't know about that last part, but I try to always be prepared. And I will say, you mentioned Dick Blumenthal. He and I have been in many a hearing together. He's a former attorney general too. He's a great questioner. And it's fun to work with guys like that because, a lot of times he's more senior than I am. So a lot of times he'll go first and I'll just listen and I'll listen. He'll ask great questions. I'll listen to the answers that they give. And then I'll draft off of that because I'll think, well, that was a lie that he just said to him or he just avoided Blumenthal's question. So I'll just come back in and see if I can't nail him. So it's great to have colleagues.
So when you're in that hearing with Blumenthal.
Yeah.
And he's a chairman and he's leading the questioning. And at this point in time, when you're sitting there and you're listening intently to the questioning and the answers, are you thinking about he's a Democrat and I'm a Republican?
Oh, no. I'm thinking about how can we get the truth here from these people? And, with Blumenthal, he and I have worked a lot together. We're on a number of committees together and we just have a great working relationship and we work together so much. I know his style of questioning. I know how he likes to ask questions. I try to also be a student of my colleagues. I try to always learn from my colleagues, and I've gotten to know now some of them well enough that I know how they like to ask questions. I know how they like to pose it, so then I think, okay, I bet he's going to ask this, and then when he gets that answer, he's going to do this, and then again, I just try to think, all right, well, he's going to tee that up, and then I can come in behind, and we can work in tandem. But to your point, is that a partisan thing? No, it's not. That's a get the truth thing.
I think some people go into those hearings, and I've had a little bit of experience being in front of in the help committee, And my first experience was nothing that I ever expected.
Yeah.
We prepared. We did research as far as who sat on the panel, both Republican and Democrats. We also knew what the issue was. We would kind of try and get ahead of what some of the controversial questions may be. I never in my life thought it was ever going to turn adversarial.
Yeah.
And when that happened, my first reaction was not thinking about Sean O'Brien, the general president of the Teamsters. I'm thinking about, this guy's attacking me personally.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to fight back, which almost gave Senator Sanders a little bit of a heart attack.
Yeah.
He was like a referee, I think
Yes.
he popped a nitro or two, right? But, I don't think people understand like how these hearings can either, go one way or the other. And it was quite an experience. It was a little intimidating at first. And then by the time I got the second battle out of the way, I was fine. I'm ready to go.
Yeah. They can be very tense. And, I try to, knowing that on my side, I mean, my thinking is that, again, I try to keep in view all the time, what's my responsibility here? What's my responsibility to the people I represent? It's not about getting clicks or can I this witness settling some score. It's that I need to get answers, and I try to not be dissuaded by the witness leading me astray. Sometimes witnesses will do, I saw that hearing that you're referring to. I saw the video of you and Senator Sanders, I think Senator Mullen, and that kind of intensity. I've had witnesses who will do that with me, and they'll use that intensity back, and they'll say, "How dare you?"
Yeah,
ask me this
I think I
question?"
remember a guy named DeJoy trying to do that.
Yes, very recently.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And I try to then.
By the way, that's probably one of the worst run business models
It's horrible.
in the world, the U.S. Postal Service.
Horrible.
They've got great workers,
Great
great
people.
employees, just bad leadership.
Very bad. Very bad. And the thing I didn't like about that, since you bring it up, and he was before us recently, is I don't like it when you say, I'm going to blame the problems that we're having at the leadership level on the people who work for us, number one. And number two, I'm going to take it out on our customers. I come from a state, we're majority rural in the state of Missouri. There's no way that I'm ever going to say, oh yeah, I'm in favor of cutting rural delivery and I'm in favor of cutting rural workers and shutting down rural post offices. I mean, no way.
Well, DeJoy's background. I mean, he was XPO.
Yeah.
Logistics, made a shitload of money, excuse my language, when he sold the company. And, we represent UPS, which is our largest employer, and they had a deal with the Postal Service, which negotiations broke down, shockingly, with the Postal Service. They want to give all that work that our members have been doing to Amazon, because Amazon will do it cheaper with a lot more volume. So stay tuned on that one. But I watched that hearing, and I've never seen anybody so arrogant, just assuming that because you're not in logistics, you don't know anything about mail delivery, like, how dare you ask me those questions? How dare you take me to task? It was actually comical.
Well, I think we got to the point finally at the end where I said to him something along the lines of, I said, I've been really nice to you in this hearing, and I've been, very, very laid back, but that's going to end. Because what he said, if we do what you want, Senator Hawley, which is just to deliver the mail, treat our workers well, and keep rural post offices open, he said, you, meaning me, that's going to wreck the Postal Service. And that's enough of that. I said, you know what? We just passed a postal bill, which I was proud to help lead a few years ago, that was all about
bail them out.
Exactly. And
Bail
it was
them out.
for the purpose of protecting their workers, maintaining rural delivery. And now he's up there saying, there's just no way to do that. And I'm like, listen, we just gave you a gob of money that he wanted in order to do it. So don't turn around and tell me that now it's somebody else's problem. It's your problem. You're the leader.
Right.
So
let's talk about this past election.
Okay.
Inauguration's over.
Yeah.
Right. There was such a divide in this country. Do you see there's an opportunity to unite this country and work together?
Absolutely. And I think you look at of course, I'm a Trump fan and a Trump voter, and he's the leader of my party. You look at how Trump won. Who did he win with? He won with working people who had voted for Democrats in the past, maybe always, but who came over to him this time and said, we got to do something different. We can't keep losing jobs. We can't have our wages continue to go down. Inflation's out of control. And I think there's a window of opportunity here where the question is, can we deliver real results for the working people of this country? And they're not, you can just look at the exit polls, they're not interested in party label, most of those
Well, I
folks.
think where the Democrats missed the boat, and we witnessed it, again, like you talked about earlier, you're working for your constituents. When you go to these hearings, you know what you're talking about. You know what the solution to the problem is, because you're talking to the people that actually or experience these situations. We do the same with our members. We're out there talking in the workplace. We're in the loading docks. We're in the warehouses. We're talking to our members, and we knew that the Democratic Party that it once was has became the Republican Party of falling in love with big tech, falling in love with corporate America, trying to be an elitist.
Yeah.
And instead of listening to the constituents and acting on behalf of the constituents, they were basically mandating and directing and, saying, you're going to do this. This is what you need to do, instead of listening and saying, what can I do? I work for you. I represent you. And that we saw that whole shift a year in advance. And ironically, we took a lot of heat for it. We took a tremendous amount of heat for it. But to your point, when you know it's the right thing to do, you don't question it.
Yeah.
You just keep moving forward. And I've been asked recently, because I'm accused of being a Republican now, which I'm still a registered Democrat. What's going to happen under this new administration? And my answer is, well, what we want to happen is we want to work across both aisles, get stuff done for working people in this country. And what we can agree on, put it to the side. But what we can agree on is focus on it. And it was making me laugh because after the election was over, I watched Chuck Schumer, who, is not a fan of mine anymore, and that's okay, get up there and give this heartfelt speech about, I know that the Republicans are in charge now, but, bipartisanship is important. I'm like, listen to this guy.
Yeah. Where's that been for the last 4 years?
And so I think for us, look, everybody says, well, what's Trump going to do for labor? And I say, well, look, he came out of the gate real strong. We went down and lobbied and worked hard to get Laurie Chavez DeRemer nominated.
Yeah.
Which, maybe I assume the president got some pushback on it. But he did that. And I had a conversation with him and I said, look, the Republicans have a great opportunity because they keep saying they want to be the working party's people. This is a great opportunity to demonstrate that.
Yeah. And
he did it. And so instead of just embracing that, everybody's like, well, what's next?
Yeah.
I don't know what's next. We'll talk on the 101st day. What do you see? What do you see Labor's role in the Republicans moving forward?
Well, I hope that Republicans will take this opportunity now to deliver in a real way for labor and for working people. And, to that end, I've introduced a framework that I hope to soon turn into legislation that I know will get bipartisan support because I know it'll get Democrat support. And I hope it'll get Republican Senate support too. And it's things like, let's protect collective bargaining rights. Let's make sure that corporations aren't interfering with union elections. Let's make sure that in warehouses, that warehouse workers are getting protected and that their rights are being protected. I think we can do a whole slate of legislation that will be pro-labor, pro-worker. And my challenge to my Republican colleagues will be, hey, listen, this is what the president ran on, President Trump. This is what you all said you were for during the election. Let's write it into law. Let's get some results now. And this goes back to what you were saying earlier. Democrat, Republican, let's deliver. What I hear most at home right now is from people who are excited about the results of this election, and even for folks who didn't vote for Trump, what they say is, I sure hope you can get something done. I sure hope that you can deliver. And that's my message. This is the time to deliver.
Well, I'm seeing the same thing. We talk to our members, and we've got a very diverse membership. And there seems to be a sense of hope out there that didn't exist prior to this election, regardless of the result that happened. I think people are optimistic. I think people like yourself, people like my organization, have been true leaders in trying to bridge that gap of drawing a line in the sand. People don't forget 1993 when NAFTA passed and all these jobs left the United States for third world countries, and we lost hundreds upon thousands of jobs.
Yeah.
We lost manufacturing, and people don't forget. And that's what people are sick and tired of. We want to bring jobs back, which you've been a huge advocate of bringing jobs back to the States.
Yeah, and you put your finger on the 1993 is a huge date, and then when we let China into the World Trade Organization, and by the way, why are we even members of the World Trade Organization? You look at what that organization has done, and you look at the policy of my party in the 90s. Sad to say, who championed NAFTA? A lot of Republicans, and then who championed Chinese membership in the WTO? Republicans did. And a lot of Democrats too, but it was a lot of Republicans. And those have been disastrous decisions, disastrous. So we've got to turn the tide on that and reverse it. We need more jobs back here at better wages.
Well, you think about COVID, right? You
Yeah.
think about when the whole world shut down basically, and we couldn't get supplies. We couldn't get supplies because we no longer manufactured
Anything.
essentials that we
Yeah.
needed here. So if that wasn't a wake-up call, I don't know what is.
Exactly right. We've got to bring our critical manufacturing back to this country. But it's not, critical manufacturing is a great place to begin. And if we can get some traction and buy-in on that, great. But the truth is that we need to rebuild our entire productive sector. And you said something earlier that I think is the key here. We've got to get an economy where if you are willing to go out there and work hard and play by the rules, you can support and raise a family on your wage. That ought to be our goal. And I've said to my Republican colleagues, many of whom are very pro-family and talk all the time about family values, and that's great. I'm pro-family too. And I said, but listen, there is a powerful economic component to this. If you cannot raise a family on a working man's wage, then you're not pro-family. And right now, let's just be honest. Let's tell the truth. We do not have an economy where working people can reliably say, I'll be able to get the wages and get the health care where I can have a family and raise them. You just can't do that. That's why they got to work multiple jobs.
I think it's a pretty simple principle. People want to work hard. The majority of people want to work hard. They want to make a middle-class living. They want to have a relatively small mortgage.
Yep.
And retire with a pension that allows them to live the lifestyle they led while they were working. It's really not that hard and difficult.
It's not hard. That's right.
And it's easy, I think, to accomplish if we get some cooperation.
Yeah.
Both parties, so to speak. So I recently was just out in California.
Yeah.
And, every issue, every situation always seems to come back to politics. And we were out there. I was out there in the middle of the unfortunate fires that are still going on. And it was amazing how politics get brought into a natural disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was important because I'm listening to all the news and talking to people. I was talking to a family that was staying in the same hotel I was that lost their home. 2 small kids, 9 and 10, lost their home because of the fire. They luckily have some means that they're going to be okay. But the first thing they said is, people knew this was going to happen. They knew that we didn't have the infrastructure. When they say they're talking about, I think, the governor and the mayor of L.A. They didn't understand or they didn't care enough.
I mean, I think that I think the failure of leadership is pretty catastrophic, and I think it goes back to just not putting people first.
I mean, I think, people are saying, we know that Governor Newsom, who him and I do not have a good relationship. He's bought and paid for by big tech.
Yeah.
And what he says and what he does are two different things. But the one thing that was stuck out of my mind when I was out there was that Governor Newsom was in a neighborhood that was totally burnt to the ground. And there was a woman, and you could tell she was very upset, very passionate. Her school burnt down as well. And she sees Governor Newsom, I think it went viral, trying to get in his SUV. He's got a phone. He's got his phone. And she says, Governor, what are we going to do here? I mean, the neighborhood's gone. The schools are gone. And she was very, very passionate. And he says, I'm on the phone with the President Trump right now. And she goes, could you put him on speaker? And he says, I have no cell service. So it's like, you just lied.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're lying to some lady who just lost her world,
Yeah.
doesn't know what her future is or the future of her kids, and you're that arrogant to not give her 5 minutes of your time to tell her or explain to her what's going on, there's something wrong.
Yeah, something really wrong. And I think it's indicative of a whole approach to government, which sees that, well, it's almost like the people are there for the government rather than the other way around. And, in this case, I mean, whether it's prioritizing environmentalist stuff, whether it's, we could talk about, we said a minute ago, whether it's prioritizing corporate profits. At the end of the day, what makes this country strong are the people of this country, and in particular, the working people and their families of this country. And if they're not strong, whether it's your state or whether it's your nation, then nothing is. And my view is, we have got to, in these next few years, we have got to put front and center working people and their families and do everything it takes to strengthen them, because without them strong, that's the foundation of the country. The country will collapse. I mean, we will not have a future unless they have a future.
So what are your goals and objectives over the next 6-year term as a newly sworn in second-term U.S. Senator from Missouri?
Well, I hope to, in this Congress, in the next 2 years, I hope to move real pro-labor legislation on a bipartisan basis and to get it enacted into law. This is something I've talked to the incoming president about, President Trump, and he ran on it, and I said, let's do it. Let's deliver. Credit card reform is part of that. He endorsed the idea of a cap on credit card interest rates. So I'm going to introduce legislation.
Do you think his credit cards are maxed out?
I doubt it. I bet he doesn't have a max. But too many other people's are. So I hope that these next few years will be about working across the aisle to deliver real results for people who need it most, and that's my constituents, that's working people. And this is an exciting time. I mean, really, you look at Donald Trump as a disruptor. We're in a disruptive period. You said earlier about people wanting results. You go back to 2016 and you look at the Bernie Sanders insurgency. Donald Trump ran an insurgent campaign in 16. Bernie ran an insurgent campaign in 16. I think voters for a long time have been trying to tell both parties, this is my point, have been trying to tell both parties, we want something different than what you've been delivering us. We want you to get back focused on us and our families and our neighborhoods. And
our borders.
And our borders. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's critical to workers and critical to the future. We've got to close the border, stop the flow of illegal immigrants.
I think, most of our members, I know myself, my great-grandparents came over from Ireland. I mean, we're all a product of immigrants. My great-grandmother came over from Ireland, went to Charlestown, Boston, Mass., where my mother and father are from, went to the Catholic Church. Yeah. Paid her $5, I believe, to get over here. And the Catholic Church housed her, steered her in a direction to a job and a life. And she came over the right way. I think the biggest problem is people are trying to protect illegal aliens that come over here and commit crimes.
That's right.
And that's unacceptable.
No, it's not acceptable. And, for my state, we're not on the border physically. Missouri, obviously, we're in the middle of the country.
I always thought Missouri was in Canada.
Listen to this. So you've got your typical Bostonian perspective, that map.
Oh
Have you seen that map of the world where it's like it's Boston, New York, Washington, D.C., and then the next city is L.A.? There's nothing in between.
You have to admit one thing, though. If Boston was as big as our attitudes, would be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Would be huge. I will give you that. Would
be huge.
But, my point is with Missouri, we are awash in drugs in every school in the state of Missouri. Where's it coming from? Across the southern border. We've got crime like we've never seen before. We've had carjackings. We've had cops attacked by illegal immigrants. We've had kids killed. This has just got to stop. And to your point, people know this. It's a common sense thing. They say legal immigration, people want to do it the right way. We welcome them. This is a country of immigrants. But that border has got to be secure. It's got to be closed from the cartels. And when you talk about working people, what really gets people animated in my state is when illegal immigrants come across, run by the cartels who run the whole thing, and bring them in, and they get jobs. And take Tyson Food, for example, just to call out a corporation I'm not very fond of. Tyson Food has got...
Well, Costco, too. So
sure.
We'll talk about Costco.
You've got all kinds of child labor, illegal child labor, illegal immigrant child labor in these supply chains. You're violating the law every which way. It's the illegal immigration, that's illegal. Child labor, that's illegal. Yet they're closing down jobs in my state, taking it away from American citizens and using child labor as a substitute effectively, illegal immigrant child labor. this is what's got to stop.
I think that's reflective of what happened in the election.
Yeah.
Think about it. People are fed up with, social justice, social issues are extremely important, right? But this election came down to, look, it comes down to economics, and the social issues are all well and good, but, protecting illegal immigrants that come into our country to commit crimes and steal jobs, that's a tough pill to swallow. So, I think to your point earlier, I think there's a lot of hope that a lot of these issues like immigration, a lot of these issues like bankruptcy reform, a lot of these issues about regulating credit cards are all, if we can execute those collectively together, I think we're going to be a much better place. We are the best country in the world.
We are.
And we've got to start acting like it.
That's right. Exactly. And we got to take steps to make sure that we are in the future. And you're just a point about social issues. My message to my fellow conservatives is that economic issues are social issues. This goes back to, you care about the family, they need good wages you can raise a family on.
Exactly.
You care about your neighborhoods and your churches and your schools. You got to have good union jobs with good union wages that will support those institutions. You can't get a job, you can't support a family, you don't have those institutions, it all crumbles. And I think for too long, a lot of conservatives have divorced those things. And they said, well, The economic stuff sits over here. That's different. And then our concerns about families and neighborhoods, and that sits in a different place. Like, no, they all go together. You can't have a strong America unless you got good paying jobs, you've got good wages, you've got protections for workers, and that's what we've got to fight for.
No, it's great. So tell me 10 things about yourself. I'm only kidding. Tell me
10.
I'm only kidding. Tell me a day in the life of Senator Josh Hawley as Dad Hawley at home.
Day in the life. So my kids are 12, 10, and 4, as I mentioned. So my morning usually begins with, I've got my 2 oldest are boys, so it usually begins with some form of fighting between my kids. I know it's like Daddy's got to come down and sort that out, and then getting ready to school, go to school. I try to my boys are on a big oatmeal kick, and so one of the few things, Sean, that I know how to make is I can make a mean bowl of oatmeal the old-fashioned way. I learned how to do it with the oats and put the milk in, and so I'm make the oatmeal for the kids. I let hold my daughter in my lap.
I know where you're going with this.
Oh, go ahead.
You're trying to get on one of these cook shows, like
no.
I know where you're going.
No. My wife could do that.
You're trying to get on Martha Stewart with Snoop Dogg. No. You and Snoop Dogg.
No, that's out of my league. But it begins with a day in the life. It begins with me at home with the kids, and then it ends with that as well. When I'm done in the Senate, whatever time we're done, I go home, and if it's not too late for the kids, we'll eat dinner together. But at the very least, and that happens most nights, which is a credit to my wife as much as anything. But then my day will end with me reading to my boys, and we have a tradition where I'll read story to them, and they'll end up punching each other, and I'll have to break up the fight, and then we go to bed, and then maybe they'll start punching me.
Repeat, and then repeat,
repeat, exactly. But that's kind of my anchor. My anchor is my wife and my kids, my family together, and to me, that's what keeps me grounded, and it helps me to remember this is what I'm here to do. My kids don't care when I come home. They don't care about any of the DC type accolades. Who praised Daddy today, who criticized Daddy today. They don't care. What they want is, Am I there? Am I present? Do I care about them? And I just think, you know what? That helps me stay connected and focused on all the other things I'm supposed to be doing.
Well, great. Well, I see great things ahead of you in the future. Look forward to working together. Likewise. And, I really, really, truly appreciate your support over the years, and I look forward to it moving forward. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Likewise. Thanks for having me.